Okay, welcome everybody to our first session of the day. I'm Sarah Jackson. I'm faculty in the Communication Studies Department, and I'm also part of the Forum for Feminist Thought that helped organize the symposium. And our first panel is a couple people who you probably already know, but I'm going to go ahead and do formal introductions in case you don't. Suzanna Walters, who is our fearless leader here at Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies at Northeastern. She's the program director, and she is a professor of sociology. Her work is centered on questions of gender, sexuality, family, and popular culture. Her forthcoming book, The Tolerance Trap: How God, Genes, and Good Intentions Are Sabotaging Gay Equality, explores how notions of tolerance limit the possibilities for real liberation and deep social belonging. Walter's previous book, All the Rage: The Story of Gay Visibility in America, examines the explosion of gay visibility in culture and politics over the past 15 years. Her other works include books on feminist cultural theory, mothers and daughters in popular culture, and numerous articles and book chapters on feminist theory, queer theory, and popular culture. And the first part of this packet you have has the descriptions of the talks that these folks are going to give, so I'm not going to read you those, because I assume you can take care of that part. And then our second panelist is Peter Campbell, who's actually a colleague of mine in the Communication Studies Department. He's a postdoctoral fellow with us. He teaches rhetoric and public speaking, and his research focuses on judicial arguments about race, sexuality, and incarceration in the U.S. constitutional law. So let's get started.
Thank you. And we hope to leave plenty of time for conversation for each of them, at the end of each of the panels. So, okay, for the short person here, huh? Yeah. Okay, so what's wrong with tolerance? A few days ago, Minnesota Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann, who puts the fun in fundamentalism, was responding to the veto of the anti-gay Arizona laws, the sort of wonderful wave of Jim Crow-like laws that have been sweeping our country that would allow people, florists, who are gay already, so I don't quite understand what the issue is, but who would allow people not to serve, give them religious license not to serve gays and lesbians. This has been the new move by the right. But Jan Brewer, the horrific governor of Arizona, and things are really bad when she's your hero. When Jan Brewer, thank you, Jan, she vetoed this bill. And Michelle Bachmann, who was unhappy with the veto, said this: "I was sorry that she made the decision, and it's because I believe that tolerance is a two-way street, and we need to respect everyone's rights, including the rights of people who have sincerely held religious beliefs." Bachmann said, "Right now, there's a terrible intolerance afoot in the United States, and it's against people who hold sincerely held religious beliefs." End of quote. So that goes along with the attack on Christmas theory of the right. So tolerance is, in other words, a trap here because it's both too capacious, right? It's too open a term. It can turn on a dime. It can be used against us, but it's also too tepid and too mild and too limited to make the case for justice and for a sort of liberatory vision of sexual freedom. And that's what I'm going to talk a bit about. Now, tolerance is also, as a term, of course, is a problematic term. And when we talk of tolerance of something, we speak of tolerating, hopefully not this, a boring conference, an annoying dissertation advisor, tolerating the horrible chill of New England weather. We don't speak of tolerating, great sex. I tolerated that, or tolerating a beautiful day or a wonderful film. We tolerate that which we really don't like and which we would rather do without. And so I think we need to remember that when we think of tolerance as both an end point and a goal and a framework for a liberatory culture, is that the very term tolerance is awful. Right? Almost as bad as acceptance, my other favorite term. But it is also in its origins about the ability to bear pain and hardship. You tolerate, you tolerate pain, you tolerate discomfort. You don't. It is the inverse of celebration and embrace and love. So tolerance always implies or assumes something negative or undesired or something that needs to be constrained and circumscribed. The crucial point then is we won't say, it makes no sense to say we tolerate something unless we think it's wrong in some way. Unless you say somehow it's wrong. Even the words of my favorite pageant superstar, Honey Boo Boo, when she says famously, "Ain't nothing wrong with being gay." I hope I did that in her little voice. To utter this, of course, means that something is wrong. Right? The very utterance of this implies its opposite. Now, let me be clear. Tolerance is better than being gay bashed. Let me just throw that out there. It's better than a space of pure abjection and denigration. But my argument here is, well, let me back up a minute. I think that many folks would look at tolerance and acceptance as well as the sort of space one gets to before one gets to the space of liberation. That tolerance is a place on the road to a more robust embrace of social difference and a more collective sense of social change. I'm actually arguing that tolerance undermines the potential for a more liberatory version and vision of sexual liberation. Tolerance undoes us. It unmakes the possibility for that. It stands in the way. Now, tolerance, of course, is part of a larger story circulating. This story sort of is the meta-story, but also underlies tolerance. And that is that the rainbow nirvana is upon us. Right? Here we are. Like, you throw away your tutus. The gay revolution has happened. We have 17 states now in which gay marriage is legal. Woohoo! That there are changes in public attitudes, the end of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. As one blogger put it, supporting gay rights is fashionable. And I think I have. All right. And there's a lot of talk that we're in the midst of a post-gay world, that we've almost won. But let me say, the almost won narrative of the liberals, and I want to be clear about this, the sort of national discourse of we've almost won is to me as bankrupt as the nothing's changed narrative of much of the queer left. And I want to throw that out there because I actually think it's true. I think there's an inverse version of we've almost won, which is this is all sort of homo light. This is sort of window dressing. All these changes are sort of window dressing on the sort of a continued narrative that's unmarked and unchanged in terms of the sort of abjection of gay life. And I do want to argue that much has changed, but the idea that victory is at hand is a false one. Like most progress narratives and narratives of redemption, so this is both a progress narrative and a narrative of redemption. It's a progress narrative that says, we found the gay nirvana, it's here, but it's also a redemption narrative because now we've cured those sex-mad, crazy, liberationist, genderqueer homos, and we've got them corralled into marriage. And we've sort of stopped the move of sexual liberation in that way. Now, one reason I say it's wrong, the progress narrative, is that wouldn't the world actually look very different if, in fact, there was a robust gay inclusion? Wouldn't it look, in fact, less straight? But also, the fantasy of completion relies on tolerance as an endpoint and immutability as both the diagnosis and the cure. Now, I want to talk a bit about immutability because the story of tolerance, this grand narrative of tolerance and of reaching Rainbow Mountain, has some major supporting characters. And in this story, in this new national narrative of progress, of, we have reached the post-gay world, we get to tolerance largely through immutability. So we have, I think, at this historical moment, a sort of unholy trinity of marriage equality, military access, and biological immutability, joined to produce a newly tolerant world and a newly accepting citizenry. And it's fascinating because, of course, this is precisely the most unqueer version of citizenship imaginable. Marriage, military service, and biological determinism. Oh, boy. You know, hello, Rainbow Mountain. So, and in fact, these are all tied into each other. So I want to make 4 major points here about the state of gay citizenship in the U.S. in this era of tolerance. The first is a sort of riff on Eve Sedgwick for the moment, where she says people are different. And I want to say things are just not better enough for enough people. Things are just not better enough for enough people. The progress narrative is simply illusory. All we have to look at is the rise in hate crimes, the disproportionate number of gay youth that are homeless, are suicidal, and the fact that we can't pass ENDA, that we have gay marriage, but we can't pass anti-discrimination employment legislation. So the fantasy of completion is an error, right? It's an empirical error. Number 2 is that gains have been made, but these gains should not be seen as the end point of queer rights, and they're configured as the end point of queer rights. In other words, gay marriage plus gay soldiers plus gay TV does not equal freedom. Okay? I mean, maybe just the TV. But gay marriage plus gay soldiers does not equal sexual freedom. The third point is that the framing of gay rights around tolerance and acceptance and marriage as the key to it forestalls addressing deeper and more challenging questions posed by full and robust inclusion. It forestalls it. And then the fourth point, which I want to get into more now, is that theories of immutability undergird all of this. Now, the question of immutability is a tough one to crack. And part of it is because immutability, or the notion of some sort of biological, endocrinological core to sexual identity, has become the reigning discourse. If you ever need to give a definition to students of what a hegemonic ideology is, look at the rise of immutability. Every good-thinking straight liberal believes that this is the story that needs to be told. If you believe that gay people are simply born this way, you are on the right side of history. And if you believe that, there's some notions of choice, volition, or who the hell cares, right? If you want to even question the question, you are put in an anti-gay position. Now, one of the dilemmas is that almost every poll seems to show, and this is, where I hate data when it doesn't back you up. Every poll seems to show that the more you believe that sexual orientation is immutable, of course no one asks about straight people, but okay, we'll put that aside for the moment, the more you believe that queerness is immutable, the more likely you are to support various forms of gay rights. Huge difference. If you believe in choice and volition, you're more likely to support anti-gay positions. So part of the dilemma in this ideology is not only that it's come to have a just so quality to it, but that it's also really come to form people's ideas about sexual freedom and sexual rights, and become the fulcrum upon which they build an argument for gay rights. So if tolerance is the sort of uber trope of the day, the end point, the goal, the golden land of Oz, then immutability is the yellow brick road, the easy roadmap to get to tolerance. Of course, there's Lady Gaga, there's Macklemore, it infiltrates every area of our public discourse. And it interestingly has been used, of course, in arguments for the marriage equality arguments, in legal cases. So you have this bizarre phenomenon where our side, arguing for gay marriage rights, say, you got to give them their rights because, they can't help themselves. They're just born that way. It's kind of like hair color or handedness, and therefore they should get their, so they're sounding like these horrible determinists. And the right wing sound postmodern. So the right wing lawyers are saying, well, sexuality, it's kind of fluid, it's indeterminate, it changes over a life course. Who's really to say how you can define sexuality? And so you have this strange specter of the right making these arguments about volition, about changeability, about fluidity, about the boundaries of sex and gender, and you have our side saying, in my jeans. You know, it is just, you know, there it is, and you've got to do it. Now, of course, there's an interesting gender divide on this, as you might imagine. That in terms of, and this is where, again, the polls actually are interesting, is that gay men are much more likely to buy into the immutability arguments than lesbians. Why? We're smarter. But, I just, you know, just to say that. But, you know, besides that, women also know the ways in which biological arguments have been used to undermine gender equity. Right? Hello, Simone de Beauvoir. So if you know, you can't have your woman is made, not born, and have your immutability cake and eat it too. So there's been much more resistance among lesbians to the immutability arguments. But also, what's interesting about the immutability arguments, besides how heinous they are, and what a thin ground that is to make for civil rights, right? To make the argument for civil rights based on we can't help ourselves, out of a sort of compulsion to act. But what's also interesting is that in almost every public representation of the immutability in television shows, news shows, the way immutability is proven has to do with gender stereotypes. So, for example, there was one, I guess it was like an ABC news special, that, you know, here's little Bobby. And, you know, little Bobby always liked Barbie. And so he's queer, you know. You know, he always liked Barbie, and he never liked to play rough and tumble with the other boys. And he didn't like to play war games, and he always, we knew. And the next thing you have is the scientist with the lab coat. I mean, literally, this is one of these things, with the lab coat coming on and saying, you know, we always knew Bobby, you know, we knew that Bobby was gay. We always, and the parents say, oh, I'm so glad now, you know, realize it's not my fault, you know, it's in his genes, but I'll say your genes too, but, you know, and so that the immutability argument hinges on gender norms and stereotypes. The evidence of immutability is gender stereotype. And it's actually interesting because in most of that evidence, it doesn't play out the same way for women. So little Sally, who likes to butch it up, right, when she's a little girl, is somehow not evidence of a dyke in training. You know, she's maybe, I don't know, like a Midwestern housewife. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it doesn't provide the same sort of evidence. The women's behavior, non-gender normative behavior, doesn't in much of this sort of scientific recounting provide the same sort of evidence. Where was I here? Am I running out of time already? Okay. I'm okay. So the biological arguments also are interestingly, let's see, here we go, are interestingly joined with God made me that way arguments. And the Macklemore song, and I'm going to sing to you now, is a great example. I won't sing it, but I am going to say it. So in the lyrics of the Macklemore famous song, I love him, he's adorable, it's such a cute song, but so heinous, you know? So he says, I can't change, even if I tried, even if I wanted to. That's the refrain, over and over again. Even if I tried, even if I wanted to, you know, okay? I can't change, even if I tried, even if I wanted to. Here's another bit of it. The right-wing conservatives think it's a decision, and you can be cured with some treatment and religion. Man-made rewiring of a predisposition, playing God, oh no, here we go. America the brave still fears what we don't know, and God loves all his children is somehow forgotten. Strip away the fear underneath, it's all the same love. So you want to know everything horrible about contemporary ideologies about queer identity? Unfortunately, our ally, that's what we have to be clear about. Our ally Macklemore's got it all going on there. All right, so it's, I can't change, even if I tried. And the right-wing conservatives think it's a decision. God loves all his children. And strip away the fear underneath, it's all the same love. There's no difference, we're all the same. Right? There's another example of that if you look at the queer response to the reparative therapy movement. So if you don't know, the reparative therapy movement is this idea of, you know, curing gays of their queerness. And there's an organization run by a guy called Wayne Besson, who has an organization called Truth Wins Out. And he's, again, a gay advocate, because one of the things I have to say is that, you know, straight liberals and gay liberals are allied in this dominant discourse. Gays are complicit in the sort of tolerance trap and complicit in immutability arguments. This is not something just coming from a sort of, you know, a sort of straight ally position. So the queer response to the reparative therapy movement is to say the reparative therapy movement is bad because it doesn't work, right? We can't change. That's the error of the you know, is that it fails, not that it's unethical, not that it's immoral, not that we don't want to change, not that why are you asking this question, but in fact that it's been proven, you know. 10 dentists say, 10 psychiatrists say, gay people can't change because it's immutable, therefore reparative therapy is wrong. So the ethical discourse of an old liberationist argument about gay freedom, about sexual fluidity and freedom, about gender freedom and challenge is lost in this. And it becomes an argument, even something as heinous as the reparative therapy movement gets challenged not on an ethical and liberationist grounds, but gets challenged with reference to the immutability arguments. All right? Saying it's simply wrong. I have some more cute things to show you here. Right? And there's a little rainbow vagina, which, I sort of want. But, I don't know how one gets a rainbow vagina, but there you go. And straight and gay brains. And this is just all over. I personally think we should just take that stamp to wards around the country and just...
You have to read it to us.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That list.
Oops, now I did it wrong. Huh? Will you fix it? You know how to fix it? No, I don't. I have a technology problem. Go back. Okay. So one of the things I want to say is how far this sort of theories of immutability and theories of and the sort of discourses of tolerance are from earlier challenges to anti-gay discrimination. And this is where I get nostalgic, of course. And I want to just quote you this from gay rights pioneer Frank Kameny, whose petition to the Supreme Court in 1961 protesting his 1957 dismissal from the U.S. MAP service of the U.S. Army says this. And Kameny says, recently died, said this. He asserts flatly, unequivocally, and absolutely uncompromisingly that homosexuality, whether by mere inclination or by overt act, is not only not immoral, but that for those choosing voluntarily to engage in homosexual acts, such acts are moral in a real and positive sense, and are good, right, and desirable, socially and personally. So here, back in 61, there's not only the absence of a language of tolerance or acceptance, but an embrace of a gay is good positivity. In many ways, I think our political discourse has now shifted from we're here, we're queer, get used to it, to we're here, we're not really queer, but vaguely gayish, be nice to us. Becoming a more tolerant society in and of itself says nothing about how values and beliefs may be altered by a robust gay inclusion and integration. And I think one of the things that I find most objectionable about the tolerance discourse, and why I argue that it really impedes development, is that it asks nothing of heterosexuals. It asks nothing of heterosexuals, because tolerance is always about a kind of benign nod to the other. It leaves that process of abjection intact. It does not embrace the potentiality of those challenges. Right? It doesn't ask, for example, what might queer families do differently? differently. So, for example, in a lot of the discourse now, and this came out in some of these Jim Crow laws that are circulating, but of course it's come up in the marriage debates a lot. You know, there's a lot of arguments about gay families, and the typical thing to say is, you know, two things about gay marriage. One, of course, we won't, you know, please let us have gay marriage. We won't change your marriages at all. To which I say, if we don't, it's not a right worth having. If it doesn't, if queer marriages don't alter the way heterosexuals imagine intimacy, family, community, sex, then it's not worth it, right? But the other part that comes up around kids particularly is, you know, this endless thing we get, and we have it now, the controversy about a terrible sociological study by Mark Rigneris, who is really the Antichrist, who has made up some research arguing that children of gay parents fare worse. And of course, the response often has been in a public way, not just about Rigneris, but about other, you know, when these are argued in the courts, you know, the headline is, children of gay parents do just as well, right? They do just as well, to which we need to respond. If, in fact, a family structure that isn't based on a binary opposition of gender doesn't do things differently, then it's a failure of imagination on all of our parts. But the part of the discourse of tolerance is that you cannot see that challenge. The discourse of tolerance and acceptance always is from the position of those doing the tolerating who don't have to change. So I'll end with that.